The fluorescent lights of the Asteria 7 space station flickered as the first explosion rocked the outer hull. Kalen Vance braced himself against the metal corridor wall, his combat instincts kicking in before his conscious mind had fully processed what was happening. Emergency sirens began to wail, their high-pitched screech reverberating through the aging station's metal framework. Security breach in sectors 7 through 9, announced the automated system, its feminine voice eerily calm. All non-essential personnel evacuate to designated safe zones. Kale pressed his finger to the communication device on his wrist. This is Chief of Security Vance. Report status. Static crackled in his ear before a panicked voice broke through. Chief, we're under attack. Multiple hostiles boarding through the mineral loading docks. They're heavily armed, military-grade weapons. They're wearing crimson exosuits with the transmission cut off with the sound of weapons fire. Jameson? Jameson. Kale switch channels. This is a station-wide alert. We have hostile boarders. All security personnel to defensive positions. All civilians to lockdown zones immediately. His mind raced as he pulled his sidearm from its holster. The timing couldn't be worse. The Xylosian ambassador was currently on board finalizing a critical trade agreement. If anything happened to her, it could spark an interstellar incident, or worse. Ambassador Lyra Valerius. The name conjured the image of the tall, dignified Xylosian woman with her pale blue skin and platinum hair. She had arrived 3 days ago with her entourage, her ceremonial armor gleaming under the station's industrial lighting. The negotiations had been proceeding smoothly, despite the typical Xylosian formality and rigid protocol. Kale started running toward the diplomatic quarters. The station's layout was burned into his memory after 5 years as head of security. 35 years old and already retired from the Earth Alliance military, he had hoped for a quieter life on this remote asteroid mining outpost. That hope was currently going up in flames. Another explosion shook the station, closer this time. The lights flickered more violently before emergency power kicked in, bathing the corridors in an ominous red glow. Vance to command. What's our status? He barked into his communicator. Multiple breaches, Chief, responded a strained voice he recognized as Thompson, his second in command. They're jamming most communications. We count at least 30 hostiles. They're calling themselves the Crimson Raiders. They've taken control of the South Docking Bay and are moving toward the central hub. And the ambassador? Still in her quarters with 2 of her guards. We have 2 of our people outside her door, but I don't know how long they can hold if the raiders get there. I'm on my way. Hold your positions and protect the civilians. Kale rounded a corner and nearly collided with 3 station workers fleeing in the opposite direction. Get to safety, he ordered, not breaking stride. The diplomatic quarters were located in the station's upper ring, typically the most secure area. As Kale approached, he could hear weapons fire echoing through the corridors. He slowed his pace, moving with the practiced silence of a veteran soldier. Rounding the final corner, he found a grim scene. 2 of his security officers lay motionless on the floor outside the ambassador's quarters. The door was partially melted, evidence of heavy weapons fire. Inside, he could hear shouting, both in English and the musical language of the Xylosians. Kale pressed his back against the wall beside the damaged door, listening. He could make out at least 3 distinct voices, none of them the ambassador's. With a deep breath, he activated a small device on his belt, an old military-grade flashbang grenade he'd kept from his service days. Breaking protocol by having it, perhaps, but he'd always trusted his gut over regulations. He tossed it through the opening in the door and covered his eyes. The burst of light and sound was followed by cries of pain and confusion. Kale moved in low, firing precise shots at the 3 crimson-suited attackers inside. They dropped before they could recover, their weapons clattering to the floor. Across the room, 2 Xylosian guards stood protectively in front of the ambassador, their own weapons drawn. One was clutching his side, purple blood seeping between blue fingers. Ambassador Valerius, Kale called, keeping his weapon ready. Are you injured? Lyra Valerius stepped forward, her ceremonial armor catching the emergency lights and reflecting them like drops of blood. Unlike her guards, who wore utilitarian protective gear. The ambassador's armor was an elaborate affair of overlapping metal plates and embedded gemstones that signified her rank. Her face remained composed, but Kale could see the tension in her silver eyes. "Chief Vance," she acknowledged, her voice carrying the distinctive melodic cadence of her species. "We are grateful for your timely intervention. My guard Telios is wounded, but we can attend to him. What is the situation?" "The station is under attack by a group calling themselves the Crimson Raiders. We need to move you to a more secure location immediately. They appear to be targeting the central hub, which means this entire section could be compromised." Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly. "These are not common pirates. Their tactics suggest military training." Kale nodded, impressed by her assessment. "My thoughts exactly, which makes me wonder if they knew you were on board." He glanced at the fallen raiders, then back to the ambassador. "Is there something about your visit they might be interested in? Something beyond the trade negotiations?" A look passed between Lyra and her uninjured guard. So quick Kale might have missed it if he hadn't been watching for it. "Perhaps we should discuss this once we are secure, Chief Vance," she replied diplomatically. "Fair enough." Kale moved to the door, checking the corridor. "We need to move now. There's an emergency shuttle bay 2 levels down that should still be secure. It's our best chance to get you off the station." "And what of the station personnel? Your people?" Lyra asked. The question surprised him. Xylosians weren't known for their concern for other species. "My team is evacuating civilians. But my primary responsibility right now is to ensure your safety, Ambassador." Lyra nodded, her face betraying no emotion. "Then lead the way, Chief Vance. Can your injured guard move?" "I can manage," the wounded Xylosian said stoically, though his face had taken on a darker blue hue. Their equivalent of pallor, Kale recalled. "Take this." Kale offered one of the fallen raiders' weapons to the uninjured guard. "It has more stopping power than your sidearm." The guard looked to Lyra, who nodded her permission. Kale led them into the corridor, moving as quickly as the injured guard could manage. They avoided the main thoroughfares, instead taking maintenance passages and service ducts. Kale had memorized every alternative route when he first took the position, a habit from his military days that was now proving invaluable. They had descended 1 level when Kale's communicator crackled to life. "Chief, they've breached the central hub. They're downloading something from the main computer, and they're asking about the ambassador's location. Sounds like she's their primary target." "Understood. Maintain evacuation protocols. We're heading to Shuttle Bay 3. Kale turned to Lyra, whose face remained impassive despite the news. "They're specifically looking for you, Ambassador. What exactly would the Crimson Raiders want with a Xylosian diplomat?" Lyra's silver eyes met his. "As I said, Chief Vance, we should discuss this once secure." Before Kale could press further, the sound of boots on metal grating reached them. He gestured for silence, pointing to a narrow maintenance shaft to their right. The 4 of them squeezed inside, just as a group of 5 raiders passed by, their crimson exosuits gleaming under the emergency lights. "The boss wants the ambassador alive," one was saying. "The core is the priority." "What about the station personnel?" asked another. "Expendable. Just find her." After they passed, Kale looked questioningly at Lyra. The core. Her face remained stoic, but her silver eyes flashed with something, concern perhaps. "We must keep moving, Chief Vance." They continued their descent, encountering no further raiders until they reached the level of the shuttle bay. As they approached the final corridor, an explosion rocked the station, more violent than the previous ones. The impact threw them against the wall, and part of the ceiling collapsed behind them. Kale recovered first, helping the ambassador to her feet. "Is everyone all right?" The uninjured guard nodded, but the wounded one had fallen to his knees, fresh purple blood staining his uniform. "Telios cannot continue at this pace," Lyra said, kneeling beside her guard. "Maris, you will remain with him." "Ambassador, my duty is to protect you," protested Maris. "And mine is to ensure the safety of our people. All of them. You will ensure Telios receives medical attention." Her tone left no room for argument. "Chief Vance has proven himself capable. Kale glanced down the corridor toward the shuttle bay. They're the medical station, one level up, east corridor. If you can get there, you'll find supplies. Maris nodded reluctantly, taking Telios's weight. Honor and glory to you, Ambassador. Honor and glory, she replied. As the two guards disappeared back the way they had come, Lyra turned to Kale. We should continue. That explosion likely means they're growing desperate. Kale studied her for a moment. The Xylosian ambassador was not what he had expected. Most high-ranking officials he'd encountered would have sacrificed their entire entourage to save themselves. This way, he said, leading her down the final stretch toward the shuttle bay. They had nearly reached the entrance when weapons fire erupted from both ends of the corridor. Kale pushed Lyra into an adjacent storage room, bullets pinging off her ornate armor as they tumbled inside. He slammed his hand on the door control, sealing them in. Are you hit? He asked, scanning her for injuries. The armor absorbed the impact, she replied, but her voice sounded strained. She leaned against a storage crate, her breathing labored. Kale looked more closely and noticed a small rupture in her chest plate where a bullet had partially penetrated. You're injured. The armor's internal systems are compromised, she said, her voice growing tighter. It's constricting. Xylosian ceremonial armor, Kale recalled from his briefings, wasn't just decorative. It contained atmospheric regulators and pressure systems designed to replicate Xylos's specific environmental conditions. If damaged, it's crushing you, he realized. Lyra's silver eyes met his, a flicker of vulnerability showing through her stoic facade for the first time. I need your assistance, Chief Vance. The armor must be removed so I can breathe. Kale hesitated. He knew enough about Xylosian culture to understand the significance of her request. Their ceremonial armor was more than protection. It was a symbol of their position, their honor. For a Xylosian of her rank to be seen without it by an outsider was almost unheard of. Moreover, the process of removing it was typically a ceremonial one, performed only by trusted servants or family members. Ambassador, are you certain? Her breathing grew more labored. There is no alternative. The systems are failing, and the emergency release mechanism was damaged in the blast. Kale nodded, holstering his weapon. Tell me what to do. Lyra guided him through the complex process, her voice growing weaker as the armor continued to constrict. The ceremonial plates were connected by an intricate system of clasps and energy conduits that required specific sequences to deactivate. The primary release is at the back of the neck, she instructed, turning to give him access. Press the two moonstone inlays simultaneously and hold for 3 seconds. Kale did as instructed, feeling a slight vibration as something disengaged. A seam appeared along her spine. Now the shoulder guards. There are release catches beneath each pauldron. Step by step, they worked through the elaborate armor. As each piece came loose, Kale carefully set it aside with a respect that seemed to surprise the ambassador. Finally, the chest plate, the most elaborate piece with its embedded gemstones and inscriptions, was the only major component remaining. This connects directly to the undersuit's regulatory systems, Lyra explained, her breathing still strained. When it releases, there will be a decompression effect. Be prepared. Kale located the final release mechanisms, his fingers working carefully around the damaged section. Ready when you are, Ambassador. She nodded, bracing herself. As the chest plate released, there was a hiss of escaping gas, and Lyra gasped deeply, her body sagging slightly in relief. Kale caught her by the shoulders, steadying her as the heavy chest plate clattered to the floor. Beneath the ceremonial armor, she wore a form-fitting bodysuit of a material unlike anything Kale had seen, something between fabric and liquid metal, clinging to her slender form like a second skin. At the base of her skull, partially visible now that the armor's collar was removed, was a small device embedded in her blue skin, some kind of neural interface. Lyra took several deep breaths, her silver eyes meeting Kale's. For a moment, they stood in silence, both aware of the intimacy of the situation, the cultural barriers that had just been crossed. Thank you, Chief Vance, she said finally, her voice steadier. Kale, he corrected. Under the circumstances, I think we can dispense with the formalities. A slight smile touched her lips, the first he'd seen from her. Kale, then, and you may call me Lyra. The moment was interrupted by pounding on the door. The raiders had found them. We need to move, Kale said, drawing his weapon. Is there anything in your armor we can use? Weapons? Communications? Lyra knelt by the scattered armor pieces, retrieving a small, crystal-like object from the chest plate. This is what they want, she said, her voice low. It is not merely a trade agreement that brought me to your station, Kale. I gathered as much. What is it? The artifact data core. It contains centuries of Xylosian knowledge and technological advancements. My mission was to deliver it to a secure Earth Alliance facility for collaborative research, a significant step toward greater cooperation between our peoples. She looked down at the glowing crystal. There are factions within my own empire who oppose this sharing of knowledge. I believe the Crimson Raiders are mercenaries hired by these dissidents. The pounding at the door grew more intense, and the metal began to glow red as cutting tools were applied from the other side. We need another way out, Kale said, scanning the storage room. His eyes fell on a ventilation shaft near the ceiling. There, it should connect to the maintenance tunnels that run parallel to this section. We can use them to reach the shuttle bay. Lyra nodded, securing the data core in a hidden pocket of her bodysuit. Kale moved a storage container beneath the vent and climbed up to remove the cover. He reached down to help Lyra up, noting how light she seemed without her armor. The raiders will notice the armor, she said as they prepared to enter the shaft. Good. Let them waste time thinking we're still here. Kale pulled himself into the shaft. Follow me, and stay close. The ventilation system was cramped, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees. Kale led the way, guided by his mental map of the station. Behind them, they heard the storage room door finally give way, followed by shouts of frustration as the raiders discovered only empty armor. After navigating several junctions, they emerged into a wider maintenance tunnel where they could stand upright. The emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow, giving Lyra's blue skin a strange purple tint. We're about 30 meters from the shuttle bay, Kale said, checking his weapon. But if they figured out where we're headed, they'll be waiting. Lyra finished. Do you have another plan? Kale considered their options. There's another approach through the waste processing section. It's not pleasant, but it might be unguarded. Lyra nodded. Lead on. As they moved through the maintenance tunnel, Kale's communicator crackled with static before Thompson's voice broke through. Chief, if you can hear this, the raiders have taken control of most of the upper levels. We've evacuated about 60% of personnel to the escape pods. Captain Forlag, he's their leader. He's demanding the ambassador and something called a core. He's threatening to space hostages if his demands aren't met. Kale looked at Lyra, whose face had hardened at the news. Thompson, this is Vance. I have the ambassador. We're heading to Shuttle Bay 3. Continue evacuation and do not, I repeat, do not give Forlag any information about our location. Understood, Chief. Be advised, we've lost contact with several security teams in the lower levels. I'm not sure if the communication cut off abruptly. Your people are paying the price for my presence, Lyra said quietly. This isn't your fault. Pirates and raiders are an occupational hazard in the asteroid belts. Kale paused at a junction, checking both directions before continuing. Though these ones seem unusually well-equipped and informed. Lyra followed close behind him. The dissidents within my empire have considerable resources, and potentially informants within your station. The implication hung in air between them as they reached the access point to the waste processing section. Kale input his security override to open the sealed door, releasing a wave of foul-smelling air. Sorry about this, he said, leading her into the dimly lit chamber filled with recycling equipment and waste compactors. Not exactly the dignified escort you're accustomed to. I'm not unfamiliar with difficult conditions, Kale. Before becoming an ambassador, I served in our defense forces. Kale raised an eyebrow. A soldier turned diplomat? That's not a common career path. Among my people, Understanding both war and peace is considered valuable for those who negotiate between worlds. She navigated the narrow walkway between processing units with practiced ease. You yourself are a warrior now tasked with protection rather than combat. Fair point, Kale conceded. They had nearly traversed the processing section when Kale's instincts flared. He held up a hand, signaling Lyra to stop. Something wasn't right, the airflow, a subtle shift in the ambient noise. "We're not alone," he whispered. No sooner had the words left his mouth than weapons fire erupted from behind a large filtration unit. Kale pushed Lyra behind a waste compactor, returning fire to provide cover. "Jameson," he called, recognizing the shooter as one of his security officers. "Stand down. It's Vance." "Sorry, Chief," replied Jameson, emerging from cover with his weapon still aimed at them. "Can't do that. Captain Forlag wants the Xylosion and the core." Kale's grip tightened on his weapon. "So you sold us out. Why?" "Credits." Jameson laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Not just credits. Forlag's employers are offering something better. A seat at the table when they take control of the Xylosian Empire. With the technology in that core, they'll revolutionize interstellar travel, weapons, systems, everything. Why remain a security grunt on a mining station when you could be part of something bigger? You believe the promises of dissidents and mercenaries?" Lyra's voice carried a cold edge Kale hadn't heard before. "I believe in backing the winning side, Ambassador." Jameson gestured with his weapon. "Now, hand over the core, and maybe Forlag will let some of the station personnel live." "Don't do it," Kale said to Lyra, his mind racing for a way out. Jameson sighed. "Always the hero, Chief. That's why you ended up here instead of commanding your own Alliance vessel. You never could see the bigger picture." "I see it clearly enough," Kale replied. "I see a man throwing away his honor for empty promises. Honor doesn't pay the bills." "Now, enough talking." Jameson never finished his sentence. A blast of energy, not from Kale's weapon, struck him squarely in the chest, lifting him off his feet and throwing him back several meters. Kale turned to see Lyra, her arm extended, the skin around her wrist glowing with a blue-white light that emanated from beneath her bodysuit. "Xylosian neural interface technology," she explained, seeing his shocked expression. "Typically used for ship navigation, but with some military applications." "That would have been useful information earlier," Kale said, moving to check on Jameson, who was unconscious but alive. "It requires significant mental energy to activate and can only be used sparingly." Lyra looked suddenly drained, leaning against the compactor for support. "And it is not something we advertise to other species." Kale found restraints in Jameson's equipment pouch and secured the trader's hands and feet. "How many more like you can do that? All Xylosian ambassadors have similar implants. We are too valuable to send unarmed into potentially hostile territories." She straightened, though Kale could tell the effort had taken a toll. "We should continue. Jameson will have informed others of our route." They moved quickly through the remainder of the waste processing section, emerging into a narrow corridor that led directly to the rear of Shuttle Bay 3. Kale checked the security panel beside the final door. The bay's environmental systems are online, which means it hasn't been breached. But if Jameson told them our destination, they will be waiting on the main entrance, Lyra finished. This rear access may still be clear. Kale nodded, inputting his security code. The door slid open to reveal the shuttle bay's maintenance area, a cramped space filled with tools and spare parts. Beyond it, they could see the bay proper, containing 3 small shuttles designed for short-range evacuation. They moved cautiously into the bay, keeping to the shadows along the wall. The shuttles sat on their launch pads, apparently untouched. The main entrance on the far side of the bay remained sealed. "Too easy," Kale muttered, surveying the seemingly empty bay. "Cover me while I check the nearest shuttle." He darted from their position to the first shuttle, quickly examining its exterior for signs of tampering. Finding none, he opened the hatch and scanned the interior before returning to Lyra. "It looks operational, but I don't trust it. They knew we were heading here. Could the shuttles have been sabotaged earlier, before we arrived?" Lyra suggested. "Possible. Let me check the maintenance logs." Kale moved to a console near their position, bringing up the bay's system records. Last authorized maintenance was 3 days ago, right before your arrival. Standard procedure. He scrolled through the logs. But there's an anomaly, an unscheduled diagnostic scan on all 3 shuttles 6 hours ago, right before the attack began. They planned for us to reach the shuttles, Lyra concluded. A trap within a trap. Kale's mind raced through their dwindling options. We need another way off this station. Before Lyra could respond, the main bay doors began to cycle open. Kale pulled her behind a stack of cargo containers as a group of Crimson Raiders entered, led by a tall figure whose exosuit bore additional armor and insignia. Captain Forlag, presumably. Secure the area, ordered Forlag, his voice amplified by his helmet's speaker system. They'll be here soon if they aren't already. Remember, I want the ambassador alive and the core intact. The raiders spread out, beginning a systematic search of the bay. Kale counted at least 10 of them, too many to fight directly, especially with Lyra weakened from using her neural interface. We need a diversion, he whispered. Lyra's silver eyes gleamed in the dim light. The shuttles. If they've been sabotaged, we could trigger the sabotage, Kale finished her thought. But we'd need a way off the station afterward. There is another option, Lyra said. Maintenance craft. Every station this size has small vessels for external repairs. Kale nodded slowly. The EVA bay, 1 level down. It would mean spacewalking through an external access port to reach it. Can you access it from here? There's an emergency airlock for external bay access, Kale said, pointing to a hatch on the far wall. Unfortunately on the opposite side of the bay from their current position. But we'd have to cross open ground. If we trigger the shuttle sabotage as our diversion, we'd have maybe 30 seconds in the confusion, Kale estimated. It's risky. All options at this point carry significant risk, Lyra replied pragmatically. Kale examined the console before him. I can remotely initiate the shuttle's engine startup sequence. If they've been rigged to fail, that should trigger whatever sabotage is in place. He began inputting commands. Be ready to move as soon as it happens. Lyra nodded, her body tensing in preparation. Kale finished the sequence and pressed the execution command. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the nearest shuttle's engines began to power up, emitting the characteristic whine of fusion drive spooling. The raiders turned toward the sound, weapons raised. 3 seconds later, the shuttle exploded. The blast wasn't as large as it might have been if the fuel cells had been fully charged, but it was enough to throw several raiders off their feet and fill the bay with smoke and debris. Kale grabbed Lyra's hand, and they sprinted across the bay, using the confusion as cover. They had almost reached the emergency airlock when Forlag's voice cut through the chaos. There, by the airlock, weapons fire erupted around them. Kale felt a sharp burn as a bullet grazed his arm, but he didn't slow down. They reached the airlock, and he slammed his palm on the emergency override, bypassing the standard decompression sequence. In, he shouted, pushing Lyra through the opening door. He followed, bullets pinging off the metal around him, and hit the close command. The outer door wouldn't open until the inner one was sealed and the chamber depressurized, a safety feature that was now buying them precious seconds. There are emergency EVA suits in the compartments, Kale said, moving to the storage units built into the airlock walls. He pulled out 2 suits, handing one to Lyra. These are designed for quick deployment in emergencies. They're not comfortable, but they'll keep us alive in vacuum for about an hour. They donned the suits as quickly as possible, the sound of the raiders attempting to override the airlock controls adding urgency to their movements. The suits were essentially flexible environmental shells with minimal maneuvering capability, a last resort for station personnel caught in decompression events. The EVA bay is 20 meters down the station's exterior, Kale explained, checking Lyra's suit seals before verifying his own. We'll have to use the emergency thrusters sparingly. They're designed for stabilization, not proper locomotion. I understand, Lyra replied, her voice slightly distorted through the suit's communication system. A warning light began flashing on the airlock control panel. The raiders had nearly overridden the safety protocols. Kale moved to the external door controls. Once I open this, we'll be exposed to vacuum. The suits will automatically pressurize, but it'll be disorienting for a few seconds. Follow my lead and don't let go of the handholds until you're stable. Lyra nodded, positioning herself beside him. Kale activated the outer door. There was a moment of resistance as the system detected the improper sequence. Then the emergency override engaged. The door slid open, and the air in the chamber rushed out, carrying them with it into the void of space. The sensation was jarring despite Kale's preparation. His ears popped painfully as the suit pressurized, and his vision swam momentarily from the sudden change. He managed to grab a handhold on the station's exterior, anchoring himself against the momentum of the decompression. Beside him, Lyra had done the same, her slender form encased in the bulky emergency suit. Beyond her, the vast expanse of the asteroid belt stretched away, punctuated by the distant gleam of stars. The Asteria 7 station itself was a complex metal structure jutting from a large asteroid, its various modules and antennae extending like metallic growths. Status, Kale asked through the suit's comm system. Functional, Lyra replied tersely, though these suits were clearly designed for human physiology. Sorry about that. We don't get many Xylosian visitors. Kale oriented himself, locating the external markers that indicated their position. The EVA bay is there, he said, pointing to a section of the station below their current position. We'll need to use the exterior maintenance rails to navigate. They began moving carefully along the station's hull, using the handrails installed for external repairs. The raiders wouldn't be able to follow immediately. They would need proper EVA equipment, which would take time to prepare. But Kale knew they wouldn't give up easily, not with the prize Lyra carried. They had descended about halfway to the EVA bay when Kale's suit sensors detected movement from the airlock they had exited. Looking up, he saw the outer door open again, disgorging 3 suited figures, raiders equipped with proper EVA gear, including maneuvering packs. "We've got company," he warned Lyra, "and they're better equipped for space than we are." Lyra glanced up, then continued moving with increased urgency. "How much further?" 10 meters. But they'll overtake us before we reach it. Kale's mind raced through options, none of them good. The emergency suits had no weapons, and their thrusters weren't powerful enough to outpace proper EVA maneuvering units. An idea struck him, desperate, but possibly their only chance. "The maintenance drones," he said. "There should be several anchored along this section for hull repairs." Lyra followed his gaze to where several boxy machines were indeed attached to the hull, their articulated arms folded against their bodies. "Can you control them?" "Not precisely, but I can trigger their collision avoidance protocols." Kale reached for a control panel embedded in the hull beside the maintenance rail. These older models use simple proximity sensors and are programmed to protect the hull at all costs. "If I can simulate a debris warning." He worked quickly, bypassing the standard command sequences to access the drone's emergency protocols. Above them, the raiders were gaining ground, their superior maneuverability evident in their smooth approach. "Whatever you're planning, do it quickly," Lyra urged. "They'll be in weapons range soon." Kale finished the override sequence and executed the command. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, as if awakening from slumber, the maintenance drones activated simultaneously. Their sensors, detecting the approaching raiders as potential collision threats, deployed defensive protocols. The drones detached from the hull and moved to intercept the perceived threats, their powerful arms extended to grapple and redirect. The raiders, caught by surprise, attempted evasive maneuvers, difficult in the confines of the cramped maintenance area. One raider collided with a drone and became entangled in its mechanical arms. Another fired at a drone, only to have the shot go wide and strike a portion of the station's exterior, causing a small explosion of escaping gas and debris. "Now's our chance," Kale said, continuing their descent toward the EVA bay. The third raider had broken through the drone defense and was still in pursuit, but the chaos had bought them valuable time. They reached the EVA bay access hatch, and Kale input his security override. The outer door cycled open, revealing a small chamber that served as an airlock for the maintenance craft bay. They entered, and Kale sealed the door behind them, beginning the repressurization sequence. As the chamber pressurized, they removed their helmets, both gasping slightly at the transition back to a standard atmosphere. "Will the inner door open without proper authorization?" Lyra asked, eyeing the heavily secured entrance to the EVA craft bay. "It should recognize my chief of security codes," Kale replied, moving to the control panel. "The question is whether the raiders have already compromised this system too." He input his credentials, waiting tensely as the system processed the request. The control panel flashed green, and the inner door began to cycle open. Kale relaxed marginally. At least something was going their way. The EVA craft bay contained 3 small maintenance vessels designed for external repairs, essentially pressurized cockpits with articulated arms and maneuvering thrusters. They weren't designed for long-range travel, but they could potentially reach the nearest Alliance outpost if pushed to their limits. "These craft don't have weapons," Kale said, leading Lyra to the nearest one. "But they're maneuverable and have reinforced hulls to withstand micrometeorite impacts." They climbed into the cramped cockpit, Kale taking the pilot's seat while Lyra squeezed in behind him. The maintenance craft was designed for a maximum of 2 occupants, and even then, it was a tight fit. "Can you pilot this vessel?" Lyra asked as Kale began the startup sequence. "Better than most. I used to run repair details on Alliance cruisers before." He trailed off, focusing on the controls. "Before I decided I'd seen enough combat for one lifetime." The control panel illuminated as the craft systems came online. Kale quickly ran through the pre-launch checklist, bypassing non-essential systems to speed up the process. Outside the bay, the airlock they had used began cycling again. The pursuing raider had reached it. "We need to launch now," Lyra urged, eyeing the airlock indicator. "Almost there." Kale finished the abbreviated pre-launch and gripped the control yoke. "Hang on." He engaged the launch sequence, overriding the standard safety protocols. The bay's outer doors began to open, revealing the star-filled void beyond. Simultaneously, the craft's docking clamps released, and Kale fired the maneuvering thrusters, guiding them toward the opening. They had just cleared the bay when the inner airlock door opened, and the pursuing raider entered the bay, weapon raised. Kale pushed the thrusters to maximum, putting as much distance between them and the station as quickly as possible. The maintenance craft lurched under the sudden acceleration, its frame creaking in protest at the treatment. Behind them, the raider had reached one of the remaining craft and was preparing to give chase. "There's a radiation storm approaching," Lyra said, pointing to the craft's sensor display, where a wave of charged particles was visible at the edge of detection range. "It may provide cover." Kale nodded, adjusting their course toward a dense cluster of asteroids. "Good thinking. Their sensors will be as hampered as ours, but will have the advantage of a head start." They raced away from Mysterious 7, the station growing smaller behind them. Kale weaved through the asteroid field with practiced skill, using the natural obstacles to break line of sight with their pursuers. The radiation storm's edge began to wash over them, creating static on their communications and sensor interference. "They're still following," Lyra reported, watching the degrading sensor display. "But the gap is widening. This craft isn't designed for prolonged operation," Kale said, checking the power readings. "We have maybe 6 hours of life support at current consumption rates. The nearest Alliance outpost is Proxima Station, about 8 hours at maximum sustainable speed." Lyra was silent for a moment, then reached into a concealed pocket in her bodysuit. She withdrew the data core, its crystalline structure glowing with an inner light. "The core contains power matrices far beyond your current technology. With your permission, I can interface it with this vessel's systems. It should provide enough additional power to reach your outpost." Kale glanced back at her. "I thought that thing was full of sensitive information your people don't want shared." "It is," she acknowledged. "But the alternative seems to be floating dead in space with the information lost entirely. I am authorized to use discretion in extreme circumstances. And you trust me with this?" Lyra's silver eyes met his. You removed my armor so I could breathe, Cale Vance. In my culture, that creates a bond of trust, not easily broken. The simple statement carried weight beyond its words. Cale nodded. What do you need me to do? Maintain our course. I will handle the interface. Lyra carefully opened a panel beneath the control console, exposing the craft's power regulation systems. With delicate precision, she connected the data core to the vessel's power matrix, using her neural implant to facilitate the integration. The cockpit lights dimmed momentarily, then brightened as new energy flowed through the systems. Power levels increasing, Cale noted, watching the displays with amazement. We're now showing 12 hours of life support capacity, and thruster efficiency has improved by 30%. The core is designed to interface with and enhance existing technologies, Lyra explained. This is but a fraction of its potential. Cale adjusted their course to take advantage of the improved capabilities, pushing deeper into the radiation storm, where their pursuers would have even more difficulty tracking them. With this boost, we should reach Proxima Station with power to spare. Lyra nodded, though Cale noticed she looked suddenly drained, her blue skin taking on a slightly paler hue. The neural interface requires significant energy, she explained, seeing his concern. I will need to rest to recover. Rest, then. I'll wake you if anything changes. She settled back as comfortably as possible in the confined space, her silver eyes closing. Cale returned his attention to piloting, guiding their small craft through the asteroid field while monitoring for pursuit. Hours passed in relative quiet. The only sounds the hum of the enhanced engines and the occasional ping of microdebris against the hull. The radiation storm had fully enveloped them, providing a natural cloak against sensors, but also preventing them from contacting Proxima Station to request assistance. Cale checked on Lyra periodically. She had fallen into what appeared to be a deep meditative state, her breathing slow and regular. Without her ornate armor, dressed only in the form-fitting bodysuit, she looked younger, more vulnerable. Yet Cale knew this was deceptive. She had demonstrated courage and resourcefulness that matched any soldier he had served with. His thoughts were interrupted by a proximity alert. A vessel was approaching from the direction of Asteria 7. Larger than the maintenance craft they had escaped in. Not a raider vessel pursuing them, but something else. The comm system crackled as a signal pushed through the radiation interference. Unidentified maintenance craft. This is Earth Alliance Patrol Vessel Artemis. Respond if you are receiving. Cale adjusted the communications array to boost their signal. Artemis, this is Chief of Security Cale Vance from Asteria 7 Station. I have Ambassador Lyra Valerius of the Xylosian Empire with me. We're evacuating after a hostile takeover of the station by mercenaries calling themselves the Crimson Raiders. There was a pause, then the comm crackled again. Vance? Is that really you old war dog? Cale's brow furrowed in confusion, then cleared as recognition dawned. Captain Rostova? Eva Rostova, the one and only. What kind of mess have you gotten yourself into this time? Lyra stirred at the voices, her silver eyes opening. What is happening? Reinforcements, Cale replied with a smile. And an old friend. The Alliance patrol vessel came into visual range, a sleek craft designed for rapid response and enforcement in the asteroid belts. It dwarfed their tiny maintenance vessel. Captain Rostova served with me during the Centauri conflict, Cale explained to Lyra. She's one of the most decorated officers in the Alliance fleet, and someone I trust implicitly. Vance, we're detecting an unusual power signature from your craft. Rostova's voice came through again, and our long-range scanners picked up multiple distress calls from Asteria 7 before communications went dark. What exactly is going on? It's a long story, Eva. One better told in person. Can you bring us aboard? Already preparing the docking bay. Follow our guidance beacon. Cale piloted their craft toward the Artemis, following the automated approach vector the larger vessel provided. As they neared the patrol ship, Lyra reached out to touch his arm. The core must be secured, she said quietly, and my presence here represents a significant diplomatic situation. Understand, Cale replied. Captain Rostova is by the book on protocol. She'll ensure proper handling of both you and the core. The maintenance craft entered the Artemis's docking bay, settling gently onto the deck as magnetic clamps engaged to secure it. As the bay repressurized, Kale powered down the systems, carefully disconnecting the data core from the power matrix with Lyra's guidance. When the bay was fully pressurized, the craft's hatch opened to reveal a reception party of Alliance personnel led by Captain Eva Rostova, a tall, stern-faced woman with short gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Ambassador Valerius, Rostova said with a formal bow, the Alliance extends its protection and assures you of our commitment to your diplomatic status. She turned to Kale. Chief Vance, you look like hell. Good to see you too, Eva. Kale replied with a tired smile. Medical team, attend to our guests, Rostova ordered. Then escort them to secure quarters. I want a full debrief in 1 hour. As medics approached to examine them, Kale noticed Lyra stiffen slightly. She still held the data core, and her posture had become more formal, the ambassador reasserting herself after their shared ordeal. Captain, Lyra said, her melodic voice carrying authority despite her obvious fatigue. I must insist on secured containment for this device, with access limited to myself and Chief Vance until proper diplomatic channels could be established. Rostova raised an eyebrow, but nodded. Of course, Ambassador. We'll provide a secure storage facility under guard. Chief Vance will be granted access as your designated security liaison. Lyra relaxed marginally. Thank you, Captain. The medical team escorted them to the ship's infirmary, where Kale's wound was treated while Lyra underwent scans to ensure her extended use of the neural interface hadn't caused lasting damage. Throughout the examination, they remained within sight of each other, a silent acknowledgement of the trust that had formed between them. After being cleared by medical, they were shown to guest quarters. The data core was secured in a specialized containment unit under guard, as promised. Before separating to rest, Lyra paused outside her assigned room. Kale, she said, using his first name despite the formal setting. I wish to thank you properly for what you did today. You honored your duty not just to your station and people, but to the principles of courage and integrity that both our cultures value. I was just doing my job, Kale replied, uncomfortable with the praise. No, Lyra said firmly. You went beyond duty. You risked your life repeatedly, made difficult decisions under pressure, and demonstrated trustworthiness that is rare between our peoples. She held his gaze. When you removed my armor so I could breathe, you saw me vulnerable in a way few non-Xylosians ever have. That creates a connection in our culture, one I have come to value. Kale felt a warmth in his chest at her words. The feeling is mutual, Ambassador. Lyra, she corrected with a small smile. Under the circumstances, I think we can dispense with the formalities. Hours later, after rest and a detailed debriefing with Captain Rostova, the situation became clearer. The Artemis had responded to automated distress signals from Mysteria 7, arriving to find the station damaged but secured by Alliance reinforcements who had responded to other distress calls. The Crimson Raiders had fled when additional Alliance ships approached, but not before causing significant damage and casualties. Captain Forlag had escaped, but several captured raiders had confirmed that they were working for dissident factions within the Xylosian Empire who opposed the sharing of technological knowledge with the Earth Alliance. The data core, with its accumulated knowledge and advanced capabilities, had been their primary target. In Captain Rostova's ready room, Kale and Lyra sat across from the Alliance officer as she outlined the diplomatic complexities that now faced them. The official Xylosian Empire representative has demanded your immediate return with the core, Ambassador, Rostova explained. But given the confirmed involvement of Xylosian dissidents in the attack, Alliance intelligence has concerns about your safety if we comply. My mission remains unchanged, Lyra replied. The core was intended for collaborative research between our peoples, a historic step toward greater cooperation. The actions of the dissidents only emphasize the importance of this mission. There's another option, Kale suggested. Instead of simply handing over the core to either side, What if we established a joint research facility, staffed by both Xylosian scientists loyal to the official government and Alliance researchers, with Lyra overseeing the operation? Rostova considered this. It would require approval from both governments, but it might satisfy the security concerns on both sides. She looked at Lyra. Would your government accept such an arrangement, Ambassador? With proper assurances and protocols, I believe they would, Lyra said, especially if presented as a response to the dissident threat rather than a lack of trust between our peoples. I'll forward the proposal to Alliance Command, Rostova said, rising. In the meantime, you'll both remain under our protection aboard the Artemis. After Rostova left to make the necessary communications, Kale and Lyra were left alone in the ready room. Through the viewport, the stars stretched away into infinity, a reminder of both the vast distances and the common ground between their civilizations. Do you think it will work? Kale asked. The joint research facility? It has a better chance than either of us might have believed before these events, Lyra replied. She turned to face him fully. What will you do now, Kale? Asteria 7 will need rebuilding, but perhaps there are other paths open to you. Kale hadn't considered his future beyond the immediate crisis. His position on Asteria 7 had been a retreat of sorts, a way to distance himself from the conflicts of his military past. But the events of the past day had awakened something in him, a sense of purpose he had thought lost. I'm not sure, he admitted, but I'm starting to think I've been hiding on that station rather than moving forward. Lyra studied him with her silver eyes. The Alliance would benefit from someone with your experience and integrity in a position of greater influence. As with the new joint research initiative, should it be approved. Are you offering me a job, Ambassador? Kale asked with a smile. I am suggesting that our paths need not diverge completely, she replied. The connection formed when you helped me remove my armor, when you saw me vulnerable and I placed my trust in you. It is not something my people take lightly. Kale felt a warmth spreading through him at her words. In human terms, we might call that the beginning of a friendship. Perhaps something more. Perhaps, Lyra agreed, a rare, full smile transforming her face. My diplomatic mission has evolved beyond what was originally planned. It may require a human security advisor who understands both our cultures and the threats we face. Someone I trust implicitly. I think I might know someone who fits that description, Kale said, returning her smile. 3 weeks later, the Joint Xylosian Alliance Research Initiative was formally announced. Located on a neutral outpost in the Proxima system, it would be dedicated to the collaborative study of the data core's contents under the co-direction of Ambassador Lyra Valerius and newly appointed Alliance Security Liaison Kale Vance. The night before the facility's official opening, Kale stood at a viewport overlooking the stars, contemplating the unexpected turn his life had taken. He sensed Lyra's approach before he heard her, awareness of her presence that had developed during their shared ordeal. Having second thoughts? She asked, coming to stand beside him. Just appreciating how quickly life can change, he replied. A month ago, I was a security chief on a mining station, convinced my most exciting days were behind me. Lyra wore a lighter version of Xylosian formal attire, still elegant, but lacking the full ceremonial armor she had worn on Asteria 7. Do you regret it? The changes? Kale turned to face her. Not for a moment. He hesitated, then asked, What about you? This assignment will keep you away from your homeworld for years. Your government wasn't entirely pleased with the arrangement. My place is here, she said simply, where I can serve both my people and the greater good of cooperation between our species. She placed a hand lightly on his arm, and where I can continue to explore this connection with someone who saw me vulnerable and still treated me with respect. Kale covered her hand with his own. I'm glad you asked me to remove your armor that day. As am I, Lyra replied softly. It allowed me to breathe in more ways than one. Together they turned back to the viewport, the stars bearing witness to the beginning of something new. A partnership forged in crisis, tempered by trust, and now poised to bridge the gap between two worlds. What had started with a desperate request in a moment of danger had evolved into something neither of them could have predicted, but both now embraced with hope and anticipation for what lay ahead.